For years, I couldn't give birth. Then I found a message on my husband's phone. We're having twins. Say goodbye to the hog. XOXO. It came from my sister's phone. My name is Reese Calloway, and the man who left the phone charging on the kitchen counter had no idea I'd already memorized the pattern to unlock it 11 months ago, back when I still trusted him enough to feel guilty for knowing it. 6 years. That's how long Grant and I had been trying. 6 years of appointments before work. 6 years of a calendar with days circled in red. 6 years of me learning to say, "We're still hoping," at every family dinner with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near my eyes. I work as a patient financial coordinator at Willow Creek Fertility Center, which is a polite way of saying I spend my days matching other women's hope to invoice numbers, explaining deductibles, filing insurance appeals, and reconciling accounts down to the last copay. I am good at my job. I am good at dates and numbers and paper trails. I did not know, standing in my own kitchen at 6:40 in the morning with his phone lighting up in my hand, that those skills were about to become the only thing standing between me and losing everything quietly. The message had come in at 6:38 a.m. I read it standing barefoot on the cold tile, coffee going cold behind me, the dog nosing at my ankle like nothing in the world had changed. Grant was in the shower. I could hear the water running, hear him humming something tuneless the way he always did, like a man with nothing on his conscience. I did not drop the phone. I did not scream. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. I did not drop the phone. I did not scream. I set it down exactly where I'd found it, screen dimming back to black, and I picked my coffee back up and drank it. Because some part of me, the part that spends all day matching numbers to grief, was already doing math. Twins. My sister Paige was 31 weeks along by the look of the last picture she'd posted. The one captioned, "Growing my miracle." No father tagged, face carefully cropped out of every photo. 31 weeks. I did the subtraction before I'd even set the mug down. 31 weeks put conception right around the week Grant told me he had a work trip to Denver. The week I'd stayed home from a 4th embryo transfer because my numbers weren't good enough that cycle, and cried alone in this kitchen while he was, apparently, somewhere else entirely, being someone else entirely. The word she used, hog, landed later. It sat in my chest for the rest of that day like something swallowed wrong. I looked normal. I answered emails. I authorized 3 insurance appeals for patients who didn't know their coverage was about to change, and I did every single thing right, because in my experience, the moment you fall apart in public is the moment people stop believing you were ever in control of anything. What I did instead, on my lunch break, sitting alone in my car in the parking garage with the engine off, was call a divorce attorney. Not because I wanted to end my marriage over one text message, because 6 years of infertility treatment does something to you. It teaches you that feelings don't win anything. Paper does. And I had paper. I want to explain, because it matters later, how I got here. How a woman who spent 6 years hoping quietly for a family ended up, on a random Tuesday, calmly asking a lawyer named Denise Halloran what a post-nuptial agreement signed 4 years ago was actually worth. Grant and I got married when I was 26. Those first years were good. I need to say that honestly, because it would be easy now to pretend they weren't. To say I saw the rot in him from day one. I didn't. I remember him driving 4 hours round trip to bring me the specific ginger candy that was the only thing that helped with the hormone injections. I remember him crying, actually crying, not performing it, after our 3rd failed transfer, sitting on the closed lid of the toilet with his head in his hands while I rubbed his back instead of the other way around, because somebody had to be the strong one that night, and it wasn't going to be him. We were a team back then, or I believed we were. That belief is the only reason what came next is going to sound so strange. The reason I had a post-nuptial fidelity clause notarized in the first place wasn't paranoia. It was because 18 months ago, Grant had an emotional affair with a coworker. Texts, not physical, he swore. And I believed him enough to stay, but not enough to stay unprotected. My father had been a title examiner for 30 years before he retired. And if there's one thing growing up in that house taught me, it's that love is not a legal document, but marriages are. And only one of those two things holds up in front of a judge. So I'd had Denise draft it quietly. A fidelity clause. If either of us committed adultery during the marriage, the offending spouse would forfeit any claim to marital property acquired during the marriage, including the house. The house we bought with $41,000 from my own fertility treatment savings account, money my grandmother left me specifically for whatever you need it for, Reese, money I'd redirected into a down payment instead of another round of injections because Grant had asked me to, because he said a home would help us relax, help the treatments work. I signed, he signed. We had it notarized on a Thursday afternoon at a UPS store 2 miles from the courthouse, and I filed my copy in a fireproof lockbox in the crawl space behind the water heater, where I also kept 6 years of clinic invoices, insurance EOBs, and appointment confirmations. Not because I expected to need them as ammunition, because it was the only physical record of 6 years of trying, and some nights that folder was the closest thing I had to proof any of it had happened at all. By the time Grant came downstairs that morning, dressed for work, kissing the top of my head like any other Tuesday, I had already sent myself a screenshot of the message from a browser tab he didn't know was open, time-stamped it, and closed the laptop. "You're quiet," he said, pouring his own coffee. "Didn't sleep great," I told him, which was true. In a way, I hadn't slept at all the night the truth had actually started. 11 months ago, back when I first noticed him locking his phone that had never been locked before. I just hadn't known yet what I wasn't sleeping over. He left for work at 7:15. I sat at the kitchen table for 11 more minutes before I picked up my own phone and made the first call. Not to a friend, not to my mother, not to him. Denise Halloran, family law, whose card I'd kept in my wallet since the emotional affair scare, folded behind my driver's license like a spare key to a door I'd hoped I'd never need to open. "Reese," she said when she picked up. "It's been a while. Everything okay?" "No," I said, "but I think I might be." I told her 3 things, in order, because that's how I organize everything. Chronological, dated, verifiable. 1. I had reason to believe my husband had committed adultery with my sister. 2. I had a notarized fidelity clause from 4 years ago that predated the affair. 3. I needed to know, before I said one word to either of them, exactly what that clause was worth and exactly what I'd need to prove it. "How far along is she?" Denise asked, meaning Paige, meaning the pregnancy, because Denise has handled enough of these cases to know the math matters. 31 weeks, give or take. "And your marriage? Any prior infidelity discussions? Anything in writing?" 18 months ago. Text messages. He apologized in writing, over email, said it would never happen again. I hadn't deleted that email either. I don't delete anything. There was a pause on the line, the particular pause of a professional doing quiet math of her own. "Don't confront anyone yet," Denise finally said. "Don't post anything. Don't tell your mother. Don't let your sister see you cry. Get me copies of the post-nup, the fertility clinic financials, and anything showing when this started. Dates are everything here, Reese. If we can show the affair predates any joint funds spent on your last treatment cycle, that changes what he's entitled to claim you cost the marriage. Can you get me dates?" I looked toward the hallway, toward the crawl space door behind the water heater where 6 years of my own paperwork sat waiting, filed the way I file everything, by date, by provider, by amount. "I have all the dates," I said. "I've had them the whole time." I didn't cry until that night, alone in the shower, water running exactly the way his had that morning. And even then, I let myself have exactly 4 minutes before I turned it off, dried my face, and went to bed early because I had a very specific plan taking shape. And it started with an invitation I knew, with total certainty, was already on its way. An invitation to a baby shower, 90-some days out, sent by a sister who had no idea what I did for a living, and even less idea what I'd been quietly keeping in a lockbox behind the water heater for 6 years, just in case. By Thursday, 48 hours after I'd read that message, my mother already knew. I hadn't told her. Paige had, her version at least, the one where she was finally getting her happy ending, and hoped everyone could be adults about it, a phrase she'd apparently rehearsed enough to type it into a group text without a single typo. I found out my mother knew because she called me at 7:52 a.m. before I'd even left for work, her voice doing the particular soft panic thing it always did whenever she needed me to absorb bad news, quietly so nobody else had to feel it. "Reese," she said, "I need you to hear me out before you say anything." I stood at the kitchen counter, the same counter where I'd read that text 2 days earlier, and I said nothing, which was becoming a habit I was getting good at. "Your sister is having a hard enough time as it is," my mother went on. "The hormones, the stress, being judged. And I know, the circumstances aren't ideal. The circumstances," I repeated, "are that she's having twins with my husband." "I'm not defending what happened," she said quickly, in the tone of a woman who was, in fact, about to defend exactly what happened. "But she's carrying 2 babies, Reese, 2 grandbabies. And whatever mess got them there, those babies didn't ask for any of it. I need you to not make this harder than it already is. For the family." For the family, I'd heard that phrase my entire adult life, always at the exact moment something was being asked of me, and nothing was being asked of Paige. For the family, I'd driven 3 hours each way every Christmas since I was 22, because Paige got too anxious flying. For the family, I'd loaned her $4,000 in my 20s that never came back, quietly, no paperwork, because asking for a signed note would have made me the difficult one. For the family, I had learned meant absorb it, Reese, so the rest of us don't have to feel uncomfortable. "I have to go to work, Mom," I said, and I hung up before she could hear my voice do anything my face hadn't already learned to control. Grant, for his part, had said almost nothing since Tuesday. He came home at his normal time, ate dinner across the table from me, asked about my day like a man reading lines off a card he hadn't quite memorized. I answered normally. I did not mention the phone. I did not mention Denise. I let him believe, for exactly as long as it served me, that his secret was still a secret, because Denise had been very clear on the phone that Thursday afternoon. "The moment he knows you know," she'd said, "he starts protecting assets, moving money, transferring accounts, gifting things to family members for safekeeping. You need 48, 72 hours of him not knowing. Minimum while we lock down what we can." So I smiled at dinner. I asked if he wanted more chicken. And on Friday morning, while he was in the shower, always the shower, that man showered like it absolved something, I photographed every document in the fireproof lockbox behind the water heater with my phone page by page and emailed the entire folder to Denise from my personal account, not my work one, because I'd learned enough in 6 years of insurance appeals to know which accounts a subpoena could touch and which ones stayed quiet. The invitation came Saturday. It arrived the old-fashioned way, cream cardstock, gold foil lettering, addressed to Reese and Grant Calloway in Paige's looping handwriting, as if the last name on that envelope wasn't about to become the single most contested word in my life. "Sprinkle before they arrive," it read. "A baby shower, celebrating Paige's miracle twins. 90 days out to the day. A private events room at a garden venue 30 minutes from my sister's apartment. The kind of place with string lights and a champagne wall, and, I would later learn, a strict no-refund policy on the deposit. Information that would matter more than anyone at that shower could have guessed. Beneath the date, in smaller cursive, someone, Paige, or possibly my mother, trying to smooth things over in advance, had added a handwritten line, 'No hard feelings.' Family is family. Come celebrate with us. I stood in my driveway, holding that card for a long time. Grant's truck wasn't home yet. The mail carrier had already driven off. And I felt something shift in my chest that wasn't grief anymore. Grief had had its 2 days, its 4 minutes in the shower, its quota. What replaced it was quieter and much more useful. The exact, specific calm I get at work when a patient's claim gets denied for a reason that isn't actually true. And I know before I've even opened the file, that somewhere in 6 years of paperwork, there's a line that proves the insurance company wrong. I did not throw the invitation away. I put it in a drawer in the kitchen, face up, where I would see it every single day between now and the shower, because I wanted the date burning in my head the way 90 days of failed transfers used to burn there. 90 days. I could work with 90 days. That night, I called Denise back. They sent an invitation, I told her. The shower's in 90 days. She wants me there. No hard feelings. Denise was quiet for a second. Do you want to go? I thought about it honestly. Standing in the hallway outside our bedroom, Grant's shower running again behind the door. If I don't go, I said, she gets to tell everyone I was too bitter, too broken to show up for my own nephew and niece. If I go and fall apart, she gets a story about how pathetic I looked. Either way, I lose the room unless I walk in holding something. Then let's make sure you're holding something, Denise said. 90 days is enough time to get the affair timeline nailed down, get the post-nup certified and ready, and figure out exactly what leverage that clause actually gives you before anyone in that family knows you have it. But Reese, I need real dates. Not around when. Actual dates, actual amounts, something a judge would look at and not be able to argue with. I thought about the fireproof lockbox. I thought about my job. 6 years of matching numbers to human grief. 6 years of learning that insurance companies and family members lie in exactly the same way. Vaguely, emotionally, and only when nobody's checking the paperwork. I can get you dates, I said. I need 3 things first. I need our savings account statements going back 2 years. I need the itemized invoice for the last embryo transfer, the one from 14 months ago, because I paid for half of it out of that account, and I want to know exactly when that money left. And I need to talk to someone at my own clinic quietly about pulling phone records tied to appointment confirmations. Because if Grant was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, on days I thought he was in Denver, there's a very good chance the clinic's own scheduling system logged it without either of us realizing. That's a start, Denise said. How fast can you get all that? I looked at the drawer where the invitation sat, gold foil catching the hallway light. 89 days, I said. I've got 89 days. People assume, when a marriage ends the way mine did, that the whole thing must have been rotten from the start. That if you look hard enough, you'll find the tell, some early red flag I chose to ignore because I wanted a family badly enough to overlook it. I need to say clearly, for my own sake as much as anyone's, that this isn't true. Grant Calloway was, for a long time, a genuinely good husband, and if I don't say that honestly, none of what follows makes any sense. I remember the ginger candy, second round of injections, year 2, when the nausea got bad enough that I couldn't keep anything down except one specific brand of crystallized ginger sold at exactly one health food store 40 minutes from our house. Grant drove there and back twice in 1 week because the store kept selling out, coming home both times with 3 bags instead of 1, just in case. Setting them on my nightstand without a word because he'd learned by then that talking about it too much made me cry, and not talking about it at all made me feel invisible. And 3 bags of candy was somewhere in between. The exact right amount of attention. I remember our 3rd failed transfer. The one that had looked so promising on the ultrasound that we'd let ourselves hope out loud for the first time. Out loud being the mistake, because 2 weeks later, the blood test came back and there was nothing there to hope about anymore. Grant went into the bathroom that night and sat down on the closed lid of the toilet with his head in his hands, and I stood in the doorway watching my husband cry harder than I'd ever seen a grown man cry. And something in me that had been saving all its own grief for later stepped forward instead and rubbed his back for 20 minutes until he could breathe normally again. That's a real memory. I'm not inventing it to make what comes later sting more. It happened, and for a long time, it was the truest thing about us. We painted the small bedroom off the upstairs hallway a pale sage green in year 3. Just to have it ready, Grant said, though we both knew we were tempting something neither of us fully believed in yet. I kept 3 paint swatches from that day: Sage Whisper, Morning Mist, and one called, absurdly, Hopeful. Taped inside my day planner for 2 more years, moving them from planner to planner each January, because throwing them away felt like giving up on something I wasn't ready to give up on. That room is still sage green. It has been, for 3 years now, the room where we keep the treadmill and a folding table and boxes of things neither of us has unpacked. I stopped calling it the nursery around year 4. I never stopped noticing, every time I walked past it, exactly what color it was. I'm telling you all of this because 18 months ago, when I first found the text between Grant and a coworker named Ashley, nothing physical, he swore, and Denise Halloran, whom I'd hired that first time too, told me plainly that emotional affairs rarely leave provable financial fingerprints, so there wasn't much a lawyer could do with words alone. I chose to stay. Not because I was naive, because the man who'd driven 80 minutes round trip for ginger candy and cried on a toilet lid over a failed transfer felt, to me, like the real Grant. And the man texting a coworker felt like a symptom of 6 years of grief neither of us had processed correctly. I stayed, and I protected myself the only way I knew how. Quietly, on paper, with Denise's help, the postnup drafted and signed and notarized 18 months ago, almost to the week before that second phone lit up on my kitchen counter with my sister's name on it. That's the part that still catches in my throat sometimes. 18 months ago, I forgave an emotional affair because I believed in the man who cried on the toilet lid. And at some point in those 18 months, I would come to learn exactly when, down to the week, that same man decided the woman worth doing this to wasn't a coworker he'd never have to sit across from at Thanksgiving. It was my own sister. I spent the Sunday after the invitation arrived doing something I hadn't done in over a year. I went down into the crawl space myself, past the water heater, and pulled the entire fireproof lockbox out into the light of the garage, where I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor and went through 6 years of my own paperwork like a woman auditing her own grief. It was all there, exactly the way I'd filed it, because filing things correctly is the one skill infertility never took from me. Insurance EOBs from 4 different rounds, invoices from Willow Creek Fertility Center, itemized down to the medication vial, bank statements I'd printed and 3 hole punched myself, back when I still believed I'd want to look at them again someday to remember how hard we'd tried. And near the bottom, in a manila folder labeled simply legal, the post-nuptial agreement, 6 pages, notarized, my signature and Grant's, dated exactly 18 months and 11 days before I found that message on his phone. I read the fidelity clause 3 times, out loud, alone in the garage, the way you check a number twice before you submit an insurance claim you already suspect is going to be denied. In the event either party engages in an act of adultery during the term of this marriage, the offending party shall forfeit any and all claim to marital property acquired during the marriage, including but not limited to real property, and shall receive only property owned individually prior to the date of marriage. Our house, bought 11 months after the postnup was signed, with $41,000 of my grandmother's money as the down payment, titled jointly, both our names on the mortgage, and, if Denise was right about the dates, entirely, completely marital property acquired after the clause was already in force. I found the last transfer invoice next, the 4th round, 14 months ago, the one that had failed the way the 3rd one had. Only this time, neither of us cried on the toilet lid together, because by then, I would later understand, Grant had somewhere else his grief was apparently going. The invoice showed $6,850 for the cycle, split between insurance and out-of-pocket, $3,400 of it paid directly from our joint savings account on a date I photographed with my phone and circled twice in red pen on the printed copy. That evening, once Grant had gone up to bed early complaining of a headache I no longer believed, the way I no longer believed most things he said without a receipt attached, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and requested our full savings account history online, all the way back 24 months, the maximum the bank's portal allowed. I printed all 41 pages. I highlighted every transfer over $500. And around page 30, in a month I would come to think of later as the actual beginning of the end, I found a Venmo transfer for $175 to a name I didn't recognize, P. Ferris. Memo line blank, dated 14 months before the twins' pregnancy would have been announced. Dated, in fact, almost exactly 9 months before Paige's due date, which put it right around the week of that fourth failed transfer. P. Ferris. My sister's maiden name, unmarried, no husband to explain a joint account. $175 sent from our joint savings, memo blank, on a Tuesday. Grant had told me he was in Denver for work. I sat very still at that kitchen table for a long time. I did not confront him that night. Denise had been clear, and I trusted her more in that moment than I trusted my own instinct to scream. Instead, I photographed all 41 pages, emailed them to her personal inbox, and added one line at the bottom. I think I found the beginning. I need someone at the clinic to help me confirm exact appointment dates against his supposed work travel. Can we talk tomorrow? She wrote back within the hour, 3 words. The kind of 3 words that meant more to me than almost anything my own family had said to me in 6 years. Yes. Bring everything. Denise's office smelled like the inside of a filing cabinet, which I found strangely comforting. I brought her the fireproof lockbox itself, not just copies, because 6 years of matching insurance claims to human suffering had taught me that originals carry weight photocopies don't. And I wanted her to hold the actual notarized postnup in her hands, not a scan of it. She read the fidelity clause the same way I had, out loud, once, slowly. Then she set it down and looked at me over her glasses. This is clean, she said, cleaner than most I see. No ambiguous language, proper notarization, dated well before the affair conduct we're alleging. If we can establish the affair began before this clause was signed and continued after, meaning it's not some new thing that started last month, his claim to the house is gone. Not reduced? Gone. And the 14 months, I said. The Venmo transfer. The failed cycle paid partly from joint savings. That's the piece that turns, I suspect, into I can prove, Denise said. Suspicion doesn't win in front of a judge. Dates win. I need 3 things confirmed independently, not just from your own bank statements, because a good attorney on his side will say you could have annotated those yourself after the fact. I need the clinic's own scheduling and billing records showing which dates Grant was listed as an authorized contact or emergency contact on your file, cross-referenced against the days he told you he was in Denver. I need phone carrier metadata, which we can subpoena later if needed, but which you may be able to informally confirm sooner through someone at your own workplace who has access to appointment confirmation logs. And I need Paige's due date pinned down by an actual medical provider, not an Instagram caption, so we can work backward to a conception window that either supports or contradicts the Venmo timeline. That was how, on a Wednesday I will remember for the rest of my life, I found myself standing at the reception desk of my own clinic after hours, waiting for Carol Marsh, our billing and records supervisor, a 61-year-old woman who had trained me on the scheduling system my first week at Willow Creek 11 years ago, and who had, in all that time, never once gossiped about a patient file, which was exactly why I trusted her enough to ask what I was about to ask. I need a favor, I told her, and I need you to understand It's a personal one, not a work one, and I'll fully understand if the answer is no. Carol Marsh listened to the whole thing without interrupting. The message, the sister, the postnup, the Venmo transfer, the Denver trips. And when I finished, she didn't say she was sorry, which I appreciate more than she probably realized. She pulled up my own patient file instead, the one with my name on it, 6 years of appointments logged under my chart, and scrolled to the 4th transfer cycle. You were listed as unaccompanied for the retrieval and transfer both, she said. Grant's listed as emergency contact on the intake form, phone number on file, but there's no note here about him being present or absent. We don't log that unless it's relevant to consent forms. What I can tell you is the appointment confirmation system texts a reminder to the emergency contact number 24 hours before every procedure, and it logs the exact send time and whether the message was opened. That's a real, time-stamped record, independent of anything either of us could type up after the fact. She pulled the log. My hands were flat on the counter, steadying myself against something I already suspected was coming. The reminder for the 4th transfer. The one paid for, partly, with the $3,400 from our joint savings. The one that failed, the one after which neither of us cried together on a toilet lid, had been sent to Grant's number at 8:14 a.m. and opened 4 minutes later, on a day he'd told me, over dinner, in detail, about a client meeting at a hotel restaurant 1,200 miles away in Denver. An open text alone didn't prove where he was standing when he read it. I already knew where to look for that part. That night, once Carol had walked me through exactly which 4 dates mattered, I logged into our shared cell phone plan's online account. My name was on it too, had been since we signed up together in year 1, and pulled the itemized data usage for each of those 4 Denver trips. Real cross-country travel leaves a trail on a phone bill. Roaming charges, long-distance data routed through out-of-state towers, sometimes even a note flagging international or extended range usage. 3 of the 4 days showed nothing like that. Ordinary local data, ordinary local minutes. A man who was, according to his own carrier, never more than a few miles from our house. I'm not going to pretend I understand phone bills the way you clearly do, Carol Marsh said quietly, once I'd shown her what the usage report looked like next to her appointment log. But I know what I can certify honestly, and that's this. The reminder went out at 8:14. It was opened at 8:18, and nothing about that was faked or altered on our end. Whatever it means next to your own bill isn't mine to say. It's just true. I asked her, carefully, if she'd be willing to certify that log if it ever came to a deposition or a hearing. She thought about it for a long moment, weighing what she owed her employer's discretion against what she owed 6 years of watching me try. And then she nodded once. I've watched you carry 6 years of this quietly, Reese. I've watched you comfort other patients through their own losses on days you just had your own. I'll certify what the system actually says. I won't embellish it. I won't need to. I confronted Grant that Friday night. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. I confronted Grant that Friday night, not because Denise Halloran told me to. She'd actually advised waiting longer, but because I'd reached the end of what I could carry silently while still looking him in the eye at dinner every night. He came home at 6, same as always, and I had the printed bank statement. The Venmo transfer circled in red, sitting on the kitchen table between 2 place settings I'd set without really planning to. He saw it before he'd even taken his coat off. "Where did you get that?" he said. Not, "What is that?" He knew exactly what it was. I have all of it, Grant. The Venmo, the Denver trips, and our own phone bill showing local data usage on every single one of those trips. Not 1 mile of roaming, not one out-of-state charge. He sat down slowly, shoulders dropping the way a man's do when he finally understands the conversation he's been dreading has already happened without him, that the outcome was decided before he ever walked through the door. It's not what you... Don't, I said. And my voice came out steadier than I expected. 6 years of telling grieving patients their claims had been wrongly denied, apparently having taught me exactly how to deliver bad news calmly. I'm not asking you to explain it to me. I already know the timeline better than you do. I know it started before the fourth transfer failed. I know some of our joint savings, money that was supposed to be for round 5, ended up in a Venmo transfer to my sister 14 months ago. And I know you signed a fidelity clause 18 months ago promising you'd forfeit any claim to this house if this exact thing happened. His face did something I'd never seen it do before. Not guilt exactly, more like a man watching a door he'd assumed was locked swing open on its own. Paige said you'd never actually go through with the postnup thing if it came to it, he said quietly. She said you'd want to keep the peace. For the family. For the family. There it was again. That phrase. Deployed one more time, and hearing it from his mouth instead of my mother's was somehow the thing that finally, completely, burned away whatever soft place in me had still been hoping this was all some misunderstanding. I am keeping the peace, I told him, standing up, folding the bank statement back into its folder with hands that had gone very calm. I'm not screaming. I'm not throwing anything. I'm going to a baby shower in 81 days, and I'm going to smile, and I'm going to let the paperwork do the part I'm too tired to do myself. I left him sitting at that table. I slept in the guest room that night, in the room that used to be sage green with hope, surrounded by a treadmill and folded boxes. And for the first time in 6 years, I didn't cry myself to sleep over anything that room represented. I fell asleep doing math instead. 81 days, 1 certified confirmation log, 1 Venmo transfer, 1 postnup, and a growing, very specific list of exactly what I still needed before I walked into that garden venue and let the truth introduce itself. Grant moved into a corporate extended stay hotel 11 miles from the house the Monday after our confrontation, taking a suitcase and leaving almost everything else, which told me more about how little he'd actually planned for what happens after an affair gets discovered than any conversation could have. I didn't ask him to leave. I simply stopped setting a second place at dinner. And by Wednesday, he'd taken the hint the way people take hints when the alternative is sleeping in a house where every drawer contains evidence against them. 62 days out from the shower, Denise Halloran called me into her office with what she described dryly as good problems, meaning the case had gotten stronger. But stronger cases require more documentation, more signatures, more waiting rooms. Carol Marsh had done exactly what she'd promised. She'd pulled the appointment confirmation logs for all 4 transfer cycles, not just the 4th, timestamps the clinic's own system generated automatically, independent of anything either of us could have altered. I did my own half of the work. I pulled 2 years of itemized data from our shared phone plan's carrier account and cross-referenced every trip Grant had claimed for work against the billing record. 3 of the 4 Denver trips showed nothing but ordinary local usage. No roaming, no long-distance routing, a phone that had never left town. The 4th trip, the actual first one, back when the emotional affair with his coworker Ashley had first started 18 months ago, genuinely showed cross-country roaming charges. Real Denver, real distance, which Carol pointed out mattered almost more than the fake ones. It shows a pattern, she explained, sliding the printed appointment log across her desk to sit beside my phone bill, for Denise Halloran and me both to see. One real trip that coincided with the start of an emotional affair, followed by a string of fake ones that coincide with a physical one. A judge doesn't need either of us to say the word affair. A phone bill and a delivery log say it for us. Denise Halloran had also, in the interim, obtained something I hadn't thought to ask for. A certified copy of Paige's prenatal record request, filed routinely as part of a standard subpoena for the eventual custody-adjacent paperwork that any divorce involving a spouse's child by another party requires, regardless of how amicably or messily things proceed. Paige's own OB had logged an estimated conception date range that lined up almost to the week with the Venmo transfer and the 3rd fake Denver trip. This is what I mean when I say dates matter more than feelings. Denise told me. Your sister's own doctor, a completely neutral party with no stake in your marriage, has now independently corroborated a timeline that your husband is going to have an extremely hard time contradicting under oath. I asked, the way I always did, what this actually meant for the house. It means, Denise said, that if this goes to a hearing, and I suspect it will because Grant's attorney is going to fight the postnup's enforceability rather than admit the affair, that's the standard move. Attack the document's validity instead of denying the underlying conduct. We walk in with a notarized clause, an independently verified affair timeline predating and continuing through your last treatment cycle, and a corroborating due date from a doctor who has never met either of us and has no reason to lie. That is about as close to unbeatable as family law gets. It was around this point in those 62 days I want to be honest about the order of things, because it matters to me that this part didn't happen the way people assume it did, like some reward dropped conveniently into my lap the moment I'd suffered enough, that I met Julian. I did not meet him at a bar or through some app or because anyone arranged it. I met him because Denise Halloran's firm shared office space with a small commercial real estate practice, and Julian Voss had come in one afternoon for an unrelated closing on a warehouse property, and the elevator in that building was, that particular Thursday, broken, which meant 6 of us stood in a lobby for 11 minutes waiting for the second elevator, making the kind of small talk strangers make in lobbies. He asked if I was there for good news or bad news. I told him honestly that I wasn't sure yet, and he said that was, in his experience, most of what lawyers' offices actually produced, uncertainty with very expensive paperwork attached. And I laughed for the first time in 8 weeks, an actual laugh, not the performance of one I'd been giving my coworkers and my mother. I didn't know, that day, that Julian had sold a logistics software company 4 years earlier for an amount of money that would eventually make my sister's face do something I will remember for the rest of my life. I knew he asked good, specific questions and didn't perform sympathy the way people do when they can tell you're going through something. We had coffee once, 2 weeks later, entirely because he'd mentioned offhand that he was terrible at reading commercial leases. And I'd offered, half joking, that 6 years of parsing insurance contracts had made me unreasonably good at finding buried clauses. It wasn't romantic, not at first. It was 2 people who both understood, in different professional languages, what it means to read the fine print for a living. I told him about the divorce on our 3rd coffee, plainly, without drama, the way I'd learned to say hard things out loud after 6 years of saying, "We're still hoping," at family dinners. He didn't offer to fix anything. He asked what I needed, which was different and better. What I needed by day 40 was simple. I needed the certified appointment logs, the notarized postnup, and Carol Marsh's written statement all assembled into one binder, tabbed and dated, the way I organize every claim file at work, because I had decided, against Denise Halloran's mild professional caution, that I was, in fact, going to the shower. You don't have to prove anything to that family in person, Denise told me. The paperwork does the proving. You could let this play out entirely through attorneys and never see your sister's face again if you chose to. I know, I said. But I've spent 6 years being the one who absorbed things quietly, for the family, so nobody else had to feel uncomfortable. I'm not interested in a courtroom reveal 3 months from now that nobody in my family actually witnesses. I want to be in the room. I want to hand my sister the truth myself, the same way she handed me hers, over cake, in front of everyone who's been told I'm the bitter one. Denise studied me for a long moment, then pulled a legal pad toward her. Then let's talk about exactly what you say, in what order, and what you have in your hands when you say it. Because if you're doing this in that room, Reese, you get one try to do it right. 62 days had become 40. 40 became 28. On day 20, Carol Marsh delivered her final signed statement, certified and notarized, confirming the appointment log without embellishment exactly as she'd promised. On day 14, Denise Halloran finished the settlement demand letter, citing the postnup, the affair timeline, and Paige's own doctor's conception window, and had it ready to hand deliver the moment I gave the word. On day 6, Julian asked carefully, without any expectation in his voice, whether I'd want company at the shower, not to prove anything to anyone, he said. Just so I wouldn't have to walk in there alone. I said yes. Not because I needed a billionaire on my arm to win an argument I'd already won with paperwork. Because for 6 years, I had walked into rooms full of people who loved me conditionally, and for once, I wanted to walk into one with someone who'd shown up simply because I'd asked. On day 1, the actual day, the one circled in gold foil in my kitchen drawer for 90-some days, I packed the binder into my bag myself, tabbed exactly the way Denise had instructed, and I put on the green dress Grant had once told me made me look like I belonged somewhere important, because I intended, this time, to be the one who decided what that meant. The garden venue had string lights strung between 2 oak trees and a champagne wall with 42 flutes arranged in the shape of a heart, and I noticed, walking in, that someone had gone to real trouble arranging it, the same kind of trouble nobody in that family had ever gone to for me. Conversation stopped the moment Julian and I stepped through the arch of white balloons. Not because of me. I'd been half invisible at family gatherings for years, the quiet one, the one who just needed time. It stopped because nobody in that room recognized the man beside me. And recognition, when it finally landed a few seconds later on my Aunt Deborah's face, moved across the room like a current through water. I watched 3 separate people quietly pull out their phones, not to record anything, but to search a name I'm certain at least one of them had just overheard someone whisper. My mother reached me first, arms already halfway open for a hug that assumed I'd come to make peace. "Reese, you came," she said, and then her eyes moved to Julian, and I watched her recalibrate an entire sentence in real time. "And you brought a friend?" "This is Julian," I said. "Julian, my mother, Sharon Ferris." Paige came next, one hand resting on the impressive curve of her belly, the other holding a mimosa she clearly wasn't drinking. Mocktail glass dressed up to look festive. She'd planned her outfit around this shower for months, I could tell. Soft blush, flowing, the kind of dress designed to be photographed. She looked, for exactly one moment, at Julian's watch, then at his shoes, then at his face, doing math I'd already finished weeks earlier. "I'm so glad you came," Paige said, voice pitched for the room, the way she always talked when she wanted witnesses. "I know things have been complicated, but family is family." "It is," I said. "That's actually part of why I'm here." I didn't raise my voice. I want to be clear about that because I know how this sounds when people tell these stories. Like a woman standing on a chair, shouting, throwing a drink. That's not what happened. I set my bag down on the gift table, next to a beautifully wrapped bassinet, and I opened it, and I took out a tabbed manila folder, the kind I use every single day at work to tell a grieving patient exactly why their claim was wrongly denied. "Grant," I said, because he was there too. Of course he was, standing near the drinks with the particular stillness of a man who'd hoped I wouldn't actually come. "I have the settlement letter Denise sent your attorney on Tuesday. I'm guessing you haven't opened it yet because you're standing here instead of dealing with it. So I brought a copy, since we're all already in one room." "Reese," my mother said, quiet and pleading. "Not here, please. Not at the shower." "I know," I said, and I meant it kindly, because some part of me did still love the woman who raised me, even now. I thought about that a lot, but I've spent 6 years being told not here at every family gathering that mattered. Not at Christmas, not at the funeral, not at my own wedding shower, where nobody mentioned the elephant in the room either. I decided this was the one time I wasn't going to absorb it quietly for everyone else's comfort. I opened the folder. I didn't read from it dramatically. I simply held up, one at a time, the way Denise and I had practiced. 3 documents. The notarized post-nuptial agreement with its fidelity clause highlighted in yellow, The certified confirmation log from Willow Creek Fertility Center, Carol Marsh's statement stapled behind it, and the settlement letter itself, which cited, in its second paragraph, a conception date range independently confirmed by Paige's own obstetrician. 14 months ago, I said, to the room, not just to Paige, not just to Grant, $175 moved from our joint savings account, money that was meant for a fourth round of fertility treatment I was going through alone that same week, into a Venmo account under the name P. Ferris. Memo line blank. Around the same time, our own shared phone plan's billing records show Grant's phone using nothing but ordinary local data. No roaming, no long-distance charges. On 3 separate days, he told me were work trips to Denver, 1,200 miles away. And according to a document your own doctor filed, Paige, the twins' conception window lines up with those same weeks. The room had gone completely silent, except for a Bluetooth speaker still quietly playing something meant for a much happier occasion. I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone, I went on, and my voice, to my own surprise, stayed level the entire time. I'm telling you because 4 years ago, I signed a document with Grant that said if this exact thing ever happened, he'd forfeit any claim to our house. I have that document, I have the dates. And as of Tuesday, my attorney has already sent the paperwork that makes this official, whether or not anyone in this room wants to have this conversation at a baby shower. Grant tried to speak. Reese, can we not do this in front of... And I simply held up the folder slightly higher, the way Denise had told me to. A gesture that says the paperwork is already speaking, and nothing he says now changes what it says. Paige's face had gone the color of the balloons behind her. You're doing this now? At my shower? For my babies? I hope your babies have a wonderful life, I told her. And I meant that too, because none of this was ever their fault. This isn't about them. It's about the fact that you told your own doctor a due date, and my clinic's own records confirm a timeline. And both of those happen to line up with money that was taken from an account meant for a family I was still trying, at the time, to have with the man you were seeing. Nobody said, for the family after that. Nobody in that garden venue said it again, not once. For the rest of the shower, which ended quietly and early, 20 minutes later, string lights still glowing over a champagne wall nobody touched again. The settlement, 3 weeks later, went exactly the way Denise Halloran had predicted. Grant's attorney tried, as expected, to challenge the post-nup's enforceability rather than deny the affair outright, arguing coercion at signing, an argument that collapsed within the first hearing once the notary's own log, a completely independent record showing both of us signing calmly, uncoerced, in a public UPS store on a Thursday afternoon, was entered as evidence. The house was awarded to me outright, and a deed transferred within 30 days. Grant's individual retirement account, protected as separate property, remained his. He moved twice more in the following year, according to my mother, who still calls, though our conversations are shorter now, and she no longer asks me to smooth things over for anyone. Paige had the twins in March. I sent a card. I have not seen them in person, not out of cruelty, but because some doors, once they've shown you exactly what's on the other side of them, don't need to be walked back through to prove you've healed. I still work at Willow Creek. Carol Marsh and I have lunch together most Fridays now, and she has never once mentioned what she did for me, because that's not the kind of woman she is. I still help other patients match their grief to invoice numbers, still tell people gently when a claim they thought was hopeless actually has a paper trail proving otherwise. And I understand that work now in a way I didn't before, in a way that has almost nothing to do with insurance. The old house sold 4 months after the settlement. I decided I didn't want to live inside 6 years of hoping anymore. Not even in a house that was, on paper, entirely mine. I bought a smaller place across town instead, on a quiet street with actual maple trees, and I painted the second bedroom myself this time. No swatches taped into a planner, no waiting to see if it deserved a name yet. I painted it a warm, ordinary yellow, the kind of color that doesn't ask anything of a room, and I moved the treadmill in there instead, because some rooms get to just be rooms now. And that, it turns out, is its own kind of relief. The last thing I did before I left the old house for good was open the fireproof lockbox one final time. I took out my hospital identification bracelet from the fourth transfer, the failed one, the one that started all of this. And I drove it, along with a box of things I no longer needed to carry, to a donation center 2 towns over. The kind that takes medical keepsakes nobody ever tells you what to do with. I dropped it in the bin myself. I didn't cry. I felt, instead, something closer to setting down a bag I hadn't realized. Until that exact moment, I'd been carrying with both hands for 6 straight years. I kept one thing from that lockbox. My new house key. On a plain, unmarked ring, nothing else attached to it. No lucky charm, no old photo, no reminder of anyone. Just a key. To a door only I decide who walks through. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.